Hi, my name is Greg Undo. I'm going to be the host for the presentation today. I'm just going to do a quick audio test on my end. Make sure everything is going through fine. Okay, sounds like audio is working kind of as expected. So today we're kind of incorporating two events. We usually do this time for our Club Cubase Google Hangout, where we do kind of live interactive Q&A. But currently this is during the normal NAMM show time, and I usually get about 18,000 requests for NAMM show passes when it's being held in person, and this year it's being held virtually, so it's branded as Believe in Music. So to have a presentation for Believe in Music, we're going to do, and this is a request that we had on the Club Cubase. So in lieu of our standard Q&A, which will resume on Friday, we're just going to do a Cubase 11 overall presentation. So this way we could actually have people, check out the presentation, and this is as if you're watching like one of the larger presentations at NAMM show. Tomorrow we will be doing one for Nuendo, showcasing more of what is in Nuendo that's not in Cubase. So some of the differences, it's a common question we have. And on Thursday, my colleague John Barron will be doing a Dorico presentation. So this will be probably a bit of a different format, but we're going to get started here in just a minute. We're going to let some people get logged in. So I may not respond to typical questions like we would, because we have a lot of information to kind of go over. And then I think this will be a good resource if you have friends that are, if you're not a Steinberg user currently, to check out or to show to your friends to kind of get an overall sense of what Cubase will allow you to do. So it's good to see a lot of our normal video. That I'm kind of monitoring the YouTube chat, because we're doing this on both YouTube and the Believe in Music platform. So I'll be kind of monitoring the YouTube chat a little bit, but we'll go ahead and get started. So again, this will be more of a Cubase presentation where we're planning to go maybe about 90 minutes if we get it all to fit in. So for those people that aren't familiar with Cubase, Cubase is made by a company called Steinberg, and Steinberg is owned by Yamaha since the NAMM show just about 16 years ago. Today might have been. The acquisition went through during the NAMM show, so I was part of the acquisition. So I actually went in as a Pinnacle employee and then left the NAMM show, 2 days later as a Yamaha employee. But Yamaha, is, the world's largest music company, and there's a lot of great synergy between software and hardware between the two companies. Now, a little bit of history with Steinberg, if you're not familiar. So Steinberg was founded in 1984 by Manfred Rurup and Charlie Steinberg. And, they started doing software for Commodore 64. And then in 1989, they came up with Cubase. And Cubase represented a lot of innovations. So when you actually look at, different programs and how they look today, a lot of these concepts were pioneered by Cubase. So we'll discuss just a couple of the quick concepts. One is going to be kind of the concept of the linear arrange page. So we could see exactly where parts go in and out. The Cubase did that first. Cubase was also the first program that integrated editing while your music played. We take that for granted now. It used to be every sequencer, you'd have to stop the music, do an edit, go back, rewind, listen to it. But Cubase was the first one that allowed you to edit while you played. Cubase was also the first program that integrated digital audio recording, MIDI sequencing, and notation on the Mac platform, the PC platform, as well as Atari. In 1996, Steinberg had some big inventions where we actually had Cubase. We released Cubase VST, and VST stands for Virtual Studio Technology. And Steinberg took a big gamble because at the time, the fastest available computer processor that you could buy as a human, a non-governmental agency, was 80 megahertz. It was like an Apple Power Mac, and Steinberg took a big gamble and said, instead of putting smart cards into dumb computers, that we're going to be putting dumb cards into smart computers. And they kind of pioneered VST, Virtual Studio technology, which allowed you to do all this processing without very expensive, complex, soon-to-be obsolete hardware. And as we've done that, we also incorporated and invented a technology called ASIO, that stands for Audio Stream Input Output. So with that, we also developed, at the time for Mac and PC, but it's primarily on Windows now, a low latency communication protocol for audio interface drivers. And this blossomed in the whole world, and many companies, have really built their whole entire company based on virtual studio technology for plugins and really democratized the whole environment. So, and as Cubase has, gone on, some of the big things we'll see are significant workflow improvements. And one thing that you'll see that you could do just about everything inside of Cubase without having the need to go to a lot of unnecessary third-party applications where you may run into what I often term versionitis, where you may, have a particular plugin that's not updated for the operating system, but your DAW is, or your audio interface. So once you have kind of all the software components, we will actually be able to do so much, and everything I show you today will be done inside of Cubase with the included tools in Cubase Pro 11. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we'll kind of break this down into a couple of different sections. We'll take a look at if you're doing like pop production, maybe if you're working as an engineer for bands, or if you're a composer, and we'll take a look and see how much we can get through in our time. So when we start doing pop production, we have a lot of customers that may not have a traditional understanding of music theory, but they're still very musical. So as we want to start off with maybe a drum loop, and we want to come up and write a particular song, I could come here and just come up with a chord progression. So we have technology called the chord track. So I can say, okay, I want this to start off as an F chord, and then maybe a B flat chord, and I want it to end on like a C 7th chord. So we could get an idea kind of like different chord progressions, and we could experiment. Now, if we don't know a good chord, an interesting chord to go between B flat and C7, I could actually just double click on this chord and go to the Chord Assistant. Here I could see it based on proximity, so musical proximity, and it's doing an analysis of the chord before and the chord after, or we could actually base it on circle of fifths. We could also have a list where we could choose to see our Chord Assistant, and it could give us chords based on common notes, or if we wanted to be based on cadence and different levels of complexity. So let's say it's saying, okay, let's try a G minor chord and see if that works for this chord progression. So we say, okay, I like that. And let's say I give this to the guitar player and they don't like to play in the key of F. I could just transpose this down directly to like the key of E. And at this point, we could just transpose. And as we want to work with this, I could drag these chords directly down and just drag it to a MIDI part. And now it's automatically created these parts in MIDI for me. So if I wanted to just have that play through a particular instrument, we could do that without any problems. Now, there are other ways to kind of work with the chord progressions as well. So let's say if you have a MIDI part, and as we've worked with the MIDI part, we want to be able to determine kind of the chords. So I could actually just look at this and say, okay, I want to go to see my score editor, and I could look at this information graphically in a dedicated drum editor or in my score editor. But I could select this particular event here and go to my project menu. And as we go to the project menu, I can go to chord track, and I could actually say, I don't know what chords this musician played. I'm going to go to the chord track and select create chord symbols. Now this will automatically create a chord track for me. And as we do this, it's created the chords derived from the piano part and automatically placed it directly on the timeline. As we work with this, this will also give us our key. So this is automatically determine the key of our particular song. If I wanted to look at my score editor, I could also just, if I wanted to do a quick lead sheet, because once we know kind of what the chords are, I could go to page mode and we could just go to our scores, and under advanced layout, I could just say show chord track, and now the chords have been automatically laid out, and I could just print that out as a lead sheet for other people. Now, once we have the chords, I could also look at this in my key editor. And we have some new functionality that was just kind of introduced recently, where we could say, okay, I want to take all of my different chords here. So let's say I have a lot of different notes, and we could just kind of zoom in and out. And we also have these things called global tracks. So now if I want to see like my chord track in top of my key editor, or if I had different marker tracks, tempo tracks, key signature tracks, we could see the chord tracks directly within the editor. But we also have a scale assistant. So I could say, okay, I want to use I could have the part automatically determine the scale, but I could also just say, let's use the chord track. And at this point, we could choose to have different scales. So if I wanted to only be able to edit and keep it in key, I could choose to quantize pitches, and that will automatically snap all the pitches to the key. But we could also do snap pitch editing. So if I'm in the key of G and I move this particular piano note, it's only going to move directly within the scale that's been defined once that's been checked. So I can't make a mistake. So if I wanted to draw notes in, it won't allow me to, even as I enter notes in, I can't enter in a note that's out of key with this turned on. Now we could also do different ways of looking at particular notes. So if I wanted to look at, we could choose to kind of filter our views of notes. I could say show only pitches that have events, so I don't see a bunch of unnecessary notes, or show only pitches that are within the scale. So now I know that as I do edits, it's only going to be in that particular scale. And as I look at this, we could also say, okay, I just want to be able to see all notes and be able to access accidentals freely at my own will and discretion. So very easy to make sure that if you don't have a traditional, strong sense of theory and you want that guidance, that it's there for you. So, and if you want it to be even like really advanced, you could actually say, okay, when I go to my chords and scales, so you could say, you could do this. You could even make up your own scales to work with. So now we mentioned before that we could do a lot of things that were kind of based and included directly in with Cubase. So a lot of times when we're working on projects, we may have like our piano part, a vocal. And if we wanted to actually be able to edit the vocal, instead of having to go to a third-party solution, what we could do is utilize what we call Very Audio, which is built in. We actually have a plugin I'll show you first, because you can do some cool stuff with this. So one of the plugins that you can instantiate is just going into pitch shift. So let's say I wanted to take this particular vocal here, and I wanted the vocalist to sound younger or older. So this is kind of an automatic way of doing pitch correction. But I could just go to my pitch shift and I could adjust this up. I can make the singer sound younger or older. So if you wanted to do be able to adjust formants and different components like that, you could do that very easily using the pitch shift plugin. So when we want to do more graphic editing, I could go to what we call Very Audio. So what my Very Audio is going to allow me to do is it could do an analysis, and now we could treat our actual our vocal very much like MIDI data. So let's say if I wanted to look at it, and when we look at the colors, there's different color schemes. So we could choose to colorize based upon the chord track, and what that option gives me is when I see green notes that they're within the chords, red notes are or out of key, and these kind of bluish notes, these aqua colors, are within the key. So green within a chord, within the key, out of key. So red, bad. So if I wanted to do like quick vocal tuning, I could just select a number of different phrases, and we have these smart tools. So I could just say, let's come right over here and just be able to kind of quantize the pitch. Or if I wanted to just kind of straighten the curve. So if I wanted to be kind of very robotic and processed for maybe a modern pop production, you could do that, or just undo that. And if I wanted to take just different parts, you could also have kind of more additional smart controls. I could adjust the volume of notes, but I could also kind of just zoom in and say, right here, I want it to be able to adjust the pitch where it drifted flat right at that particular point. And you could just do like very easy to do, like, when people kind of scoop into notes. And you could also just kind of tilt the pitch of notes as well as you see fit. So very easy, plus formant adjustment. So as you make a change, but it's so easy and fast to do. And if you don't like any of the changes, you have unlimited levels of undo and unlimited levels of redo. Now, since we know what the chords actually are, we wanted to be able to do some more creative things with that. So if we look at our chords, based upon our chord track, and we listen to it, what I want to do is just to add a vocal harmony there. And let's say our singer isn't in the building or they left. So at this point, what I'm going to do is just use my range selection tool, select just that one phrase. And what I want to do is just go to my audio to generate harmony voices. And we'll just go ahead and do up to 4 harmonies. I'll hit OK. And as we generate I'll just take these harmony voices and I'll just drop them in volume. And as we listen to it, so now at that point, it's just generated musically correct harmonies based upon what was derived from the chord track, derived from the piano. So even if I now wanted to go and edit all of these, I could just select, and we could choose to edit all of these different parts together within my Vari audio. And if we wanted to create, a harmony that was kind of not in tune, we could just come right over here, say, okay, let's do it based on the chord track. And I could just select each of my different voices and be able to adjust the harmonies as I see fit. Now, one of the things that's also really essential for kind of pop production is, being able to manipulate sounds quickly. And we could do this with our sampler track. And there's been a kind of a big enhancement to sampler tracks that have kind of been introduced with Cubase 11. So when we see a sampler track, I could literally just kind of take any audio file or any MIDI that's being routed to a virtual instrument. So let's say if I come here, I just have one of these sounds going to like the included Retrolog synthesizer. And if I wanted to actually to play that as a sample, I could just drag it directly in. And now I could play that particular sample that quickly and that easily. Now we could do lots of manipulation to samples as well. So if I wanted to take, let's say, a drum loop, I could come here, let's say if I have just a quick drum loop. So at this point, I could drag the drum loop directly into my sampler track, and we will have kind of different playback. So as I play back, I could play back higher pitches and it plays back faster, or lower pitches. It'll play back slower. We'll have different quality algorithms. So we can say, okay, I want this to be extreme. But if I wanted to play back the same tempo regardless of pitch, I could just come right here and enable audio warp. So now whatever pitch I hit, it'll just play back at the same tempo. I could also slice these. So if I say, okay, let's just create slices, and I could drag this slice directly over into my project window and be able to edit. And now when I go to the samples, I could just, again, come right over here to the sampler track and be able to play each individual slice. And if I wanted to be able to edit without having to have kind of a third-party tool for that. Now, working with this also, let's say if I wanted to do not necessarily just like slicing drums, but let's say I had a vocal.
No time to hesitate, it's all been done. You wanna have it, you can get.
You can manually put in your own slices, and now you could just say.
You wanna hesitate.
And you could do just quick vocal chops.
You wanna hesitate enough, baby.
And be able to come up with really interesting stuff. Now, a lot of times in pop productions, we may want to have like different legato modes. So let's say if I have like a bass sound, I may want to, like, if I hit the second note without releasing the first one, we could have this note kind of glide up into the pitch. And we could set this amount of the glide, just, like the speed of that, just by clicking right there. Now, there's also kind of a really interesting mode where we could say, as I hit the second note, you can see that the sample will get re-triggered from the start. But if I wanted the sample to continue to play at the sample position but change pitch, I could enable this icon. And once I do that, I could get those like really interesting glides that you often hear in pop music. And I had kind of an interesting thing I did with my friend who I just made him sing kind of a one-note piece. So let's just take a listen to the melody that my friend Daryl Pearson sang for me.
I am singing this phrase for Greg so that he can
monophonic, one single note, monotone.
With this program.
So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the first key and I'm just going to play a melody based on what he's actually is singing. So I'll just play the melody in real time and come up and we'll just listen to it here.
I am singing this phrase for Greg so that he can
get what he needs accomplished with this program. This is
a recording.
So very fast and easy just to come up with new, interesting, very fast ideas. Now let's go back to maybe our first sample that we had here. And if I wanted to apply different filters and get kind of creative sounds, I could just kind of, let's adjust. And we could also have two different LFOs. So as I wanted to come here, we could say, let's send this to my LFO. So if I wanted this to be kind of more rhythmic, I could say, let's just take this and while I'm holding that down, if I wanted to kind of change the frequency. And let's say I wanted to come here to pan, and I wanted the pan to be on LFO 2. So now. So you can come up with like really interesting and a number of different filters, types and filter shapes as well can be employed with this. Now, there's also this really handy lock function. So if I really like this, all the settings I've done here, I could just go to my media bay and just drag and drop any audio file that I want into the sampler track. And now all of those settings are just automatically preserved, but it's just using a different actual sample as the basis with that. Now, a lot of times using in pop productions, people are kind of squeezing a lot of different material out so that we could get kind of, the maximum impact of sound. So let's say if I wanted to take just a quick, let's say kind of more of like a dance production here. So one of the plugins that was introduced in Cubase Pro 11 was the Squasher plugin. And what this is going to allow you to do is it's an upward downward compressor. So let's say this will be for my kick and snare, and this will be for the rest of my track. So we'll go ahead and just kind of bypass it, and we'll start off and we'll bring this in. So this is a multi-band up down compressor. So let's say if I want to come here, let's take it just on a kick of this track. So without, and I'll put it on the rest of the track here so we can kind of get a sense of how it can bring out those synthesizers or those kick tracks. So when you need to get that edge in your sound, very easy to do with the Squasher. Now, what's really interesting, this gets to be very incredibly flexible because not only does it have side chaining, but each side chain could, you have 3 independent side chainable bands per instance of Squasher. So I could have a different side chain input for this band, like my kick, my snare, and maybe a vocal as sidechain inputs for the different frequencies. So as you want to work with that. So when you need to give your production kind of that extra edge, that push, to make it kind of stand out, that's a great plugin to work with. Now, for more creative tasks, we have one called Loop Mash FX. And when we look at this, we could actually see that this is going to be kind of laid out like a piano keyboard. And this will allow us to actually, this means that we could actually play this in real time if we have a MIDI track that's being routed directly out to Loop Mash FX. But we'll show you some of the stuff that we could do with this. And this could be more creative, kind of DJ style stuff, but you get some great results. So let's take a listen. So I'll come here, let's say I want to do. You can change the rhythmic pulse. So let's say I want to do almost like scratching on the vinyl. Let's say I want to do. So you want to do drops. Like some different types of vinyl effects like that. If I want to do like different chops, or if I wanted to repeat a part of a hook. And again, you could just play this in real time. Or even slow it down. Let's say we'll just capture that. And then that's just automatable and playable via MIDI. So just, super fast to kind of work with. Now, a lot of times if we're doing like taking an existing track, there's maybe we're doing a remix type of scenario and we need to actually take to add more contemporary production elements on top of it. One of the issues gets to be of how we can deal with different tempo synchronization. So let's say if I have a project here and this project isn't synchronizing to the tempo. So as we listen to our metronome, it's not locked. The two are just running completely independent of each other. So if I wanted to align this to the grid, many people will say, oh, okay, we had to painstakingly map the grid to the existing information and then take each audio file, each MIDI part, and have that tempo aligned to that. But in Cubase, what I can do is I'm just going to take this particular section and I'm going to go to my project menu and let's go to tempo detection. And as we go to our tempo detection, we'll have, just take a quick listen to it here. And what this has done is done a tempo map of our project. So you can see that's roughly changing every single beat. And let's say I'm just going to define kind of where the downbeat is here. So at this point, I'll just kind of drop that in. So let's say that's our downbeat. So let's say at this point, I wanted to have an audio loop automatically match the tempo of that particular file. So with Cubase, you get all sorts of different drum loops, lots of great content that's included, so you don't have to go out and spend a lot of extra money on content. But let's say if I just wanted to come to, let's say, just find a quick, and we could have everything kind of organized. So let's say I want to take that drum loop. Let's drop it to the grid here. So I'm going to say, let's start this at, we'll just kind of zoom in. Say, okay, we're going to start that right at measure 1. And what I want to do is to have this automatically follow the grid. I just click on musical mode. So without musical mode, I play it. The two aren't aligned at all. But when I enable musical mode, that drum loop will now just automatically be almost like a tempo parasite to the jazz backing track. So this is automatically just going to follow along. And that's, those two files are just going to lock directly up. Just that easily. So you don't have to worry about, doing all sorts of like really cryptic editing, doing warp markers on every single beat, like you may have to do with other tools. Just that fast and easy in Cubase. Now, Steinberg, is part of our history of innovation, was the first company that actually did a software-based drum machine. So as we want to start working with drum machines, we've been kind of doing this longer than anyone. So we'll just open up a quick project here. So let's say we'll just kind of start, and let's say I'll just kind of play. Okay, so we have Groove Agent SE, and this could kind of work in two different methods. So we'll start looking at it as kind of like maybe more of like an MPC style paradigm, and then we'll have kind of a virtual drummer paradigm we'll look at afterwards. But if I wanted to shape different sounds, we could drag and drop samples directly from our media bay right into the project. Hang on just one second. Okay, so let's say if I'm here, I'll just take this, and I wanted to kind of shape the sounds. So here I could just take my bass drum if I wanted to. So let's say, so this is our bass drum that's being used. So if I say, okay, let's just grab the tuning. So if I wanted to I'll select this pad, and let's just say I just want to adjust the tuning just on that particular pad. Give you that kind of club frequency for the subs. Or if I say, okay, I want to take this sound, and let's go ahead and bring the volume of that up. And let's say I just wanted to just go to my pitch tab. And as I go to my pitch tab, what I want to do is just randomize the pitch. So it's not going to be playing back the same pitch every single time. It's just kind of randomly. And let's come over here and say, okay, I want to take this kick, and let's go back to, let's say, my pitch envelope, and I could just go to pitch, and let's just go to my envelope amount. And at this point, and this could be aligned to the grid. So super easy, super fast to be able to really kind of change your sounds. Let's say if I wanted to apply filters on one sound or on all the sounds, we could go to kind of the filter tab. And if I wanted to just kind of turn on and I could have independent filters on each individual drum if you're so inclined. You know, if you wanted to add effects, you know, you have also a full mixer. So you could say, I want to go to my auxiliary send. Let's just kind of take our filter back here. So I'll just go to my filters and let's say I'll just turn this off. But if I wanted to take just that clap sound, you know, I could take that sound and come right over here and let's go to the mixer and I could just say, okay, I wanted to add as my aux send, let's say a reverb or a delay. So I'll just come here and we have built-in plugins inside of the plugin inside of Cubase. So let's say I'll just put like a big reverb on it on aux send 1. So I'll go to this snare and let's just go back to our edit and under the amplifier section, I can say, you know, we could just tweak that reverb. Plus we could edit the samples, we could do slicing, kind of like what we did, you know, again, all right here. And if I want samples and sounds in, you know, all I had to do is just kind of like, let's say I have a number of snare drums here and I wanted to drop these in and make my own kit. I could select these. And as you do this, let's just drop it right onto a pad. And I could have this automatically be set to trigger via velocity, or if I wanted to layer or random. So, you know, it's that easy to kind of drag and drop. And if you have your patterns, so many of the kits will come with their own patterns as well. And then you could just drag these patterns right onto your project window. So we could just come right there and just drag those patterns and be able to have all those kind of playing in the MIDI domain and be able to edit those. And if we wanted to edit the patterns, again, we have our own dedicated drum editor, which is ideal for programming patterns. And you have kind of the similar folding capabilities. So you can say, show me only sounds that have events and hide everything else. And as I wanted to just see velocity only on, you know, my hi-hat versus, you know, my snare versus my kick, I don't have to worry about editing different velocities and getting them mixed up. Now, if we're doing more bands and more singer-songwriters, we can see that Groove Agent is actually kind of really well laid out for dealing with acoustic drums and almost like a virtual drummer, if you will. So as we want it to come here, let's say, okay, I want it to play back, let's say a quick pattern. We can now go look at our instrument and you'll get a number of different kits with this. So this is one of the kits that you'll have. This will allow me to select just like the kick drum. And if I wanted to add more room to just the kick, but not the snare. So if I wanted to say, okay, let's take the snare and let's just adjust the tuning on the snare. So, you know, we're going to have all sorts of amazing control for each of these. We'll have kind of a full-on mixer that we could have multi-track. So we have 4 aux sends and different inserts, kind of all available. But one of the great things is we could do so much more than just play back the static, boring pattern. So what I could do is come over here. I could take this particular pattern and we can see that we have these yellow patterns. And here I could have different levels of dynamics. So if I wanted to select the different patterns, I could say, let's make it softer. Or I wanted to make it more rhythmically active, so more complex. And if I wanted to assign these to like MIDI CCs, just right click and say learn CC and then just move it onto the knob. And if I say, okay, let's just make this playback halftime feel. Now we also have intros, endings, and fills. So I can say, how about every 4 bars do a random drum fill? So it's not playing back the same thing. I could also say, let's set auto complexity so that for every measure, it's going to play back a slightly different variation level, 1 or 2 levels of complexity up or down, so that it's not playing back the same thing over and over again. And I can say, okay, you know, it's a dead giveaway when you have a crash at the beginning of every single repetition of the pattern. So only started at the main or only after a fill. And now at this point, I could also just say, while we're playing, I could solo this particular drum sound. And then I'm going to set the MIDI input to Groove Agent. And as I hit play, we're just going to record all of that information just into Cubase directly that easily. Now, one of the other things that's really interesting is, let's say if I've sculpted the sound of my drums, so say we're playing along here, and I go to my software mixer and I'm like, okay, I want more reverb, and I wanted to have, 4 bands of EQ. I wanted to have compression, tape saturation on each drum sound. We have 32 stereo outs, 32 levels of velocity. But one of the coolest things is I could take this, and let's say I've painstakingly sculpted all of the effects. I could right click, and then I'll just say export the Groove Agent mixer and all of its effects directly to Cubase. And then when we go to our Cubase mixer, all of those settings that we made in the Groove Agent mixer have been carried over automatically. And why do we do that? Because it's the right thing to do. Now, let's say we had real drums and problems working with bands, and there's a lot of production issues that could be very expensive to do real drums well. So if I wanted to do real drums really well, we may have to kind of cheat a little bit. So we'll show you a couple of tricks that we could do. So let's say maybe we don't have the best recording environment. So I'm going to, let's say I take this production, and as we're working with this, let's say I wanted to have the kick be just a little beefier, right? So we have a couple of different kicks. So what I want to do is to actually just come, and I'll double click on my kick track, and I could even do this while it's playing. I'll go to hit points, and I'll just quickly set kind of a threshold, and we'll zoom in. And I just want to make sure that we're not including like other tracks. All right, so now what I want to do is to I have a kit loaded up here with a Groove Agent kit loaded up. So again, I'll double click, and I'm going to say create MIDI notes, and let's put these MIDI notes at C1. So I hit OK. And now we're just triggering that in MIDI inside of Groove Agent. So let's go ahead and open up Groove Agent. So we just automatically took that, and I'm going to go ahead and just mute the drums. So the kick. And now we're just hearing it in Groove Agent, so I can make it louder, tune it. If I wanted to blend the kick from Groove Agent with the live performance. But let's say I wanted to take like the 3 drums in the live performance. I could actually just kind of take those and with my range selection tool, drag them to their own pad and be able to just trigger those and layer those together. So if the drummer hit it once magically, you could just go back and drag that out and do a quick drum replacement. Again, without any third-party tools. Now, let's say our drums maybe aren't quite as tight rhythmically as we would like. So I want to, let's go ahead and just do the thing that every drummer would hate. I'm going to put the drums up with the click track. I'll just make this just a little louder so you can hear it. So let's say every time there's going to be like a drum fill that was a little behind the beat. And it looks like we have maybe a snare roll coming up. All right, so that snare roll was a little rushed. So what I want to do is I'm going to find kind of the hit points for my snare drum as well. So I'll just kind of come here and we'll just adjust the threshold so we're only not getting the drums that are kind of bleeding. And on this, we kind of start off with the hi-hat, if I remember right. So let's find kind of the rhythmic hit points for the hi-hat. So what I'm going to do is these are all placed into a folder, and folders are great because you could actually just kind of collapse and hide different tracks. But I'm going to enable a function on a folder called group editing. So now what I want to do is to be able to come over here to my quantizing, and I'm going to set priorities. So I'm going to say my kick is going to have the highest priority, my snare, second highest priority. And let's come over here to my hi-hat and give that priority. And now what I want to do is when I do kind of, tightening up drums, because a snare drum is going to be in multiple microphones, what I want to do is just to slice. And we could do this. I'll just say, okay, we'll continue. And now it's created thousands of little slices in each of those drum parts. I'm going to say I want this quantized to 16th notes. So I'm going to choose, let's just quantize. And then it shifted all of those events, and some of them may have little gaps. So as we kind of look at them, we can see that there will be gaps often when events were moved. So what we need to do is now just click on Crossfade. So as we look at this, we'll just say, let's just look at it and say, and now we listen to it, and our drums are just tightened up. So that drum fill didn't come in late. Let's listen to the snare. And your drums have been fixed without really sacrificing the audio quality, the integrity of the drums. So very easy to fix common drum recording problems with doing, different drum replacement or being able to quantize and fix drums. Now, as we want to, another area that could be problematic in the studio is guitar amps, because sometimes people will come in with guitar amps that work great in a live scenario, and they're just, maybe they're so loud it could be hard to deal with. So one of the things we wanted to do is to make sure that we had great amp modeling plugins, because again, Steinberg was the first company in 1995 with a plugin called Red Velvet that did a software-based guitar amp. So let's go ahead and take just a quick listen to a couple of them. I got some cheap wine. So if I wanted to look at the bass part here, and I wanted kind of the classic Ampeg tone, we have the VST bass amp for this. So if I wanted to switch between different amplifiers, cabinets, effects, microphones. But let's say if I wanted to come over here to guitars. So we have kind of really beefy, thick guitar tones. And these are all just coming from the VST amp rack. So I'll go ahead and let's just solo the guitars. And we'll go ahead and bypass. So that's the guitars. And now with. So we'll take 1 on, 2 on. And then kind of in context. And again, with the guitars, you're going to have different amplifiers, different cabinets, pedals, microphone placements, pre and post effects. So if you need to get great guitar tones, it's built in. You don't have to buy extra tools. Again, super high quality plugins that are built in. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other stuff that's built in. Because a lot of times when we have different types of work, different projects, and we think of what a large format console is. We also can think of, as we're working with consoles, that we may, often, every console is going to have EQ. It's going to have, often compressors and gates on every single channel. And a lot of times people will replicate this with the use of plugins, but, there could be better solutions. So let's say if we're taking kind of just a quick example project here, and I wanted to look at the channel of my bass. I could click on the channel settings EQ. And when we do this, we have 16 insert slots. We can have a user-definable pre and post fader. Each of the sends, we have 8 sends, can be used. But we have 4 bands of parametric EQ. So if I wanted to come here, I could adjust the EQ without having to instantiate a plugin. And one of the great things, I could say, you know, I'm in a key of G. I could actually just go to the frequency and just type in like G5. And I could move based on the note that I type in. So I could actually see the notes as we come over here to adjust. And I could also have my full channel strip. So if I wanted to have a noise gate, I could have 3 different types of compressors, and I could edit those compressors. So if I say, okay, I wanted this to be more of a tube compressor for the bass, or a vintage compressor, I can see my channel EQ. I could have a de-esser or like a transient designer envelope shaper. I want to run through magneto. I wanted to have a limiter. But let's say I wanted I want to change the signal flow order. I can just drag and drop and change just like that. Now let's say as I'm doing EQ, I may want to just kind of solo the track and listen to it. But maybe it's actually conflicting with another particular track. So we have this comparative EQ. So I could say, let's find my bass, and I could solo the bass. And let's say maybe this is clashing with the acoustic guitar. So I'm going to go to my guitar. And now I can see the guitar frequencies here in orange in my bass. And I could now go to the guitar track and EQ that while I'm in the bass track. And I could just solo and solo the bass. So I could have this comparison EQ, and I click here on bass. Now I'm EQing the bass. Now I'm EQing the guitar. So you could just have 2 different tracks and switch between the different channel EQs. Now with this, we also wanted to have different types of plugins available to really kind of sculpt the sound. So, you know, if we really need to kind of, you know, enhance stuff, we could go to our frequency EQ. And this is an 8-band dynamic EQ. So I could just come here. I could adjust this. I could also just click on this mode here where it's auto listen. So as I'm making adjustments, I'm only hearing what I'm actually editing, what I'm affecting. So if I wanted to have this on a mid side, so I could have just the like left and right sides, or just the middle part of the panning or of the spectrum, I could EQ that independently, or left and right. So if I wanted to EQ like for a piano part, I could do that. I could also have this be linear phase EQ. And then we could also enable dynamics mode. So when I click here on dynamics, we could actually just see all these different settings directly here. So I have full dynamic control. And again, like we saw in the squasher, we could have up to 8 different independent sidechains for each band of the EQ. Another plugin that was kind of introduced was the Imager plugin. This has been updated because a lot of times when people do like make their mixes sound wider, the low end gets really kind of fluffy and washy. But here I could say I want the low end to be very kind of narrow, so it's more mono for the low end, but I want the highs to be wider. And we could kind of adjust the outputs here a little bit. So if I make the lows really wide, the mix can start to get really muddy. And you see this kind of like a little phase scope to give you an indication of what's going on in those particular frequencies. And each frequency can be soloed. And my favorite plugin is more of an analysis tool, but it's one that called Supervision. So it starts off, you think it's just a big, huge meter, but you could have up to 9 different meters, but there's 18 meters in total. that you could have going on at once. So this will give you an idea, and if you wanted to customize your different meters or what point it's doing your metering at. So you can say, okay, in my phase scope, I want this to be, instead of lines, I want it to be envelope. I could see, as I hover over, I could see not only the pitch, but the frequency. I can see the hot frequencies here, and you could customize colors. Here's a view of some of the other meters. So you have kind of different wave meters. So extensive metering, where a lot of people are just using this on a dedicated screen, that they love the feel and vibe of it so much that it's so helpful. Now, many times when we're working with musicians and we're tracking, one of the problems gets to be of how they could actually, deal with Qmixes and how they could hear themselves. So, one of the great things with Cubase is it has a dedicated control room. So as I'm looking at different material here, I could just say, so say as we're tracking, most people want to have what they often call the more me headphone mix, where all of a sudden they want to have everything kind of just, the bass player wants to hear more of themselves over the drums want to hear more of themselves while they're recording in their headphone mix. So many times you have to use kind of a dedicated hardware solution to do this, and it gets to be problematic. But if we want to come here, we go to our full screen Cubase mixer, and we're going to have the functionality called Qmixes. So, and this is part of the control room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my tracks. And as we select the tracks here, we'll just pop right over here. And I want to create a quick Qmix. It's going to be independent. So I will right click. So we set this up using available inputs and outputs in our audio connections in the control room. So we can have up to 4 independent Qmixes. So let's say in this case, I have a singer, vocalist, drummer, guitar, bass, drums. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to say, let's go ahead and go to all Qs, and I want to activate all of the Q sends. Okay, so we're going to turn on all the Q sends. And now what I want to do is replicate the mix. So I'm going to right click and we're going to say use the current mix levels. So right now we'll have our current mix settings, and it's going to replicate these mixers to all of my different Q mixes. And let's go ahead and replicate the panning as well. So I'd say let's use the current pan settings. So as we want to play with this, let's say, okay, we're going to start off, we'll play. Now we want to build a headphone mix for our drummers. So let's say our drums are going to be Qmix 3. So I'm going to select all of my drum parts, and I'm going to hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and we'll increase these. And let's say for the bass, so now I could actually, from my control room, I could listen to the different Qmixes. So let's say we'll go to Qmix 3. This is what my drummer is hearing, and my bass player in their headphones, and we're just feeding this out to audio outputs of our interface to like a headphone amp. And let's say, so this way every single musician could have their own independent mix that they need to hear when they're tracking. And one of the great things is there could be a talkback. So we could actually communicate, hook up a microphone to our audio interface and talk to the musicians. We could also say, maybe the bass player, the drummer, and the guitarist wants to hear the click track in their headphones, but the vocalist, they don't want to. So you could turn off the click track to the individual Q mixes as well. So it gets to be incredibly powerful that the Qmix can actually be saved with the project. So while you're tracking, each musician could have their own Qmix set up. Now we took a look before at how we could, deal with, a stereo audio track that has like varying tempo. And let's say now we have a multi-track. So let's go ahead and listen to the multi-track version of that. And let's say we want to be able to do edits on a grid. So we see many times that musicians want to be able to hear all of their different sources, but they want to be able to, we often see musicians be very weird about recording with a click track if they haven't played with one. And often it's not for the benefit of the music, but it's really for the benefit of the engineer. So they could do align the audio to the grid. So if we have our click track on, again, there's no correlation with a click to what's going on. So what I want to do is just to go to the overhead drum mic, and we're going to do just on this particular project. Let's go to we'll go to our tempo detection. So I'll just say analyze. All right, and we'll go ahead and we'll just listen to it. And we have like offbeat correction, so okay, so let's say now every single file is speeding up and slowing down. The whole performance is changing in tempo. So I'm going to just go ahead and move kind of my tempo track and my signature track up to the top. And what I want to do is, let's say they fluctuated too much. It was a perfect take except for it just sped up too much at the very end or in the middle part or after a drum fill. So again, I'm going to come and let's just find our downbeat of this. And we'll just zoom a little bit here. Okay, so we're just going to zoom in and find our downbeat. I think it's going to be right around here. Okay, so we're going to say, okay, our downbeat starts right there. So we have our tempo map, and this tempo map is fluctuating. And if we kind of blow this up, our tempo map is fluctuating every single beat. And that's fine. But let's say if we want it to be the same tempo, how could we deal with that in a multi-track environment? So what I want to do is I'm going to select all of the tracks and go to audio. We're going to say advanced, and we're going to say set definition from tempo. So as we do this, we're going to say, we're going to save, and we could choose to save this information. What this is going to do is basically embed the tempo changes as metadata into every single track, into every single file. We could do it into the audio files themselves or into the project. So I'll just choose project. So as we do this, so it's writing all that metadata in. So I see my tempo changes here. So let's say roughly we're like 140-ish. 144. So if I wanted to play back a steady, perfect tempo, even though all the multi-tracks are fluctuating, I could just turn my tempo track off and I'll just type in 144. And if I want it to be, let's say, perfect tempo at 156, or 188. So now it's bop. Okay, or I want it to be 100. So I could just kind of come right over here. So you could just kind of change the tempo. Now let's say if I wanted to kind of have the tempo speed up and slow down, we could also do like graphic tempo editing. So I could just say, okay, I want this to have its natural fluctuations, but I want it to be kind of less variation on that. Or I want to take this part of the tempo and I just wanted to do maybe like an accelerando on it. So I'll select the tempo here and let's just have it speed up. So as we listen to it now, we could have our music just automatically, again, just follow whatever tempo changes we have. So we hear it get faster and faster. Faster, faster, and it's going to go back to the original tempo. We can see kind of starting right about now and just seamlessly back to the tempo. So if you find that, you know, it was a perfect take, the feel was great, except for just, you know, tempo crept up or slowed down, you don't have to, like, you know, have the musicians do it over and over and over again. You could just make those changes very easily and very musically inside of Cubase. Now, in the age of COVID, one of the things that we, you know, have run into is people can't get together to record. And this is one of the great things that Steinberg has been doing for a long time, is we have this concept of Vst Connect Se. And what this is going to allow you to do is anyone that downloads a free program for their Mac or PC, or I think it's $5 for iOS, you could give them a basic code. They could get a free software program, and you'll be able to record them directly into your system using Vst Connect. So with the version that comes with Cubase Pro, it will allow you to do 2 tracks at once. So you could actually see the person directly on the webcam. So if you wanted to, you know, talk to them and see them, to see exactly what they're playing, see if they're singing into the microphone backwards, you can then just simply hit record. The audio goes out through the control room to the musician. It's all delay compensated. They perform right along with that, and that input is recorded directly back into Cubase. Now, there's also a Vst Connect Pro, and that will allow you to do up to 16 tracks of audio. But the free version, you could do, like, you know, 2 tracks of audio, record vocals, guitar solos, and be able to work with your friends, even if, you know, they live, you know, a mile away, they live in a different continent. You could remotely record them directly using the Vst Connect Pro. So now we'll take a little detour and go into, you know, Cubase is widely used by, you know, many composers for TV and films. It seems like every film I see is someone that I've helped with their Cubase, every TV show. So it's incredibly well used for that. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of the reasons why. So when people are dealing with different articulations, let me just get this booted back up here. Just give me a second. Okay, so as people are dealing with different orchestral instruments, they often have different articulations that could be available. So, and to utilize those different articulations, one of the things that we could do is use something called expression maps. So I will just come over here. Let's open up just a quick project. So just create an empty project. And so, you know, so to be able to make the orchestra as realistic as possible, we would need to be able to switch between different articulations. So as we work with our different articulations, I'll just kind of start this up here. Okay, so, you know, we'll just take one. This is actually using, so many of the sample libraries, if it's Hallian based, can automatically generate these expression maps for you. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen. This is a quick Schubert piece, give you kind of an idea. Let me just set the audio connections. So what we want to do is to kind of be able to imitate all of the different expressions. So when we have different orchestral libraries, there's going to be different samples for long notes, short notes, etc. You know, or spiccato, pizzicato. Okay, so as we want to look at this, one of the things that is, let's say we'll go to our violin 1. So just come here. And as we'll just kind of blow this up a little bit. So we could see, our typical, where we can see, our velocity information if we want, but we could also switch this to articulations. So in this particular instrument, we could have these different expression maps, and these expression maps are widely available for all the big orchestral libraries. So that when I go to violin 1, these are all of the different articulations and the notes that switch between these different notes, between these articulations. So if we hit an A-1, that will do a whole tone trill as we play notes. If we play an A♯-1, that will do spiccato. A B-1 will do a half tone trill. So if we wanted to just kind of solo just the violins here, we'll show you how we could switch these articulations. So, and we can see these articulations clearly labeled. Now, the problem is with a lot of systems is they actually just record a MIDI note. And then when you go to print out the notation, you have all these notes that aren't actually part of the music, but tell the sampler what layer or what set of samples to play. So let's go ahead and just take a look and we'll listen to this. So let's say, we have legato, and it kind of works because it's a slow piece. So at this point, I wanted these notes to articulate a little better. So I'm going to make these notes just switch to spiccato. And then down for, let's say, just down for this particular note. Hang on just one second. And I just saw a question about, articulation maps created in Cubase be imported to Dorico Pro. So they are the same exact technology. So that's a great question that we had. So, these are the same identical expression maps. So when I come here, and it makes total sense for for doing notation stuff. So let's say if we come here now, I will. So we can hear that those notes were shorter. And let's just do something silly here. I'll switch this to pizzicato and then back to, so we can now listen to this. And let's say if I wanted to do a whole tone trill just on that note and go back to legato, we can see what that's going to sound like. So at this point, so these could be recorded in real time. And now one of the beautiful things is we said, okay, if we're doing and we're telling these articulations that switch to samples, we thought it'd be cool if when you go to the actual instrument itself, that, when you look at it in this notation, that these articulations are automatically put directly into the score as well. So when we go to our, expression maps, we could just drop in these expressions and that would send the key switches the same way that as we see it directly from the key editor. Now, one of the reasons why, people go, oh, when you play orchestral stuff, why it sounds like very realistic often is because you can get so highly accurate with the articulations. But one of the things that also makes a big difference is like one of the included plugins. And this is a convolution reverb called Reverence. And again, this comes with, Cubase Pro. You don't have to pay extra for this. And instead of kind of artificially recreating a reverberant environment, what you're able to do here is they've sampled different concert halls throughout the world. So as we're doing this, we could just say, I could go through and say, I want it to be an Austrian concert hall. So we could have that, or if I want it to be a Dutch concert hall. So again, these are the actual rooms have been sampled. So let's say an English chapel. So very easy to kind of get that cohesion when you're trying to mimic a real orchestra, again, using the convolution reverb reverence coupled with the different articulations. Now, one of the things that we see people doing all the time is, scoring to video. So when we're, it's very common that people will load up a quick video project inside of Cubase and then be able to do this. So let me just find a quick project here. I think I created a little earlier. All right, so I'll just quickly do a quick search for it. But let's say if I wanted to be able to export for, working with video, we have a lot of great options for that as well. So we'll just come over here. I'll open up a quick project so you can see it. So, being able to kind of, have all of your different instruments line up musically with that could be a big deal to work with. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we have a dedicated video track inside of Cubase. Now, one of the things that can be really interesting is when we get into this concept of being able to move different parts. So we're going to have one of the transport modes as we kind of work with this is we could go to and activate use video follows edit mode. So if I'm actually kind of placing different scenarios, let's say I wanted to come and we'll just take a listen to this. And if I'm moving particular notes around, as I move a note, we could have those parts automatically update the video frame by frame as we work with this. So anytime that I move a particular event, I can see exactly where that event is on our video window, or if I move a particular note, even at the note level, we could just have that placed directly with video. Now, once we're done with this, we could just choose to export, and we could export the video and all of our score, the composition that we've done, that we've tempo mapped, we'll be able to export all that information directly in with the video file. We also have a lot of capability for, when we realize that you have so many different sounds, so many different, loops, presets, we have the ability to come over here and be able to find all of these different sounds very easily on your network, on your computer system. But at this point, we could say, okay, I want to look for, different loops or projects. And we could just say, I want to find particular things. We have Media Bay. And this will automatically be able to find like all of your different projects that you want to work with. So if you're looking in particular folders, you could just say, I wanted to just look for, anything with, different attributes, and we could make your own user-based attributes as well. So if you wanted to just kind of come directly here, say, okay, I'm looking for, audio files that would have, the word, any of my media types. So let's say if I was just wanting to audition different presets, I could now even just say, okay, I'm looking for something with BIM in the title. We could just find all of these different components very easily. So as we kind of want to work with those different components, we could have that. And one of the other great things is we could have multiple projects open simultaneously. This will allow us to actually have to, drag and drop different files from project to project. And we could also import tracks from particular projects as well. So if I wanted to easily be able to take different projects around, we could do that as well. Now let me just look for one particular file and we'll get wrapped up here pretty soon. Thanks for all your patience. I know it's a lot of information. The end of this presentation will be available to watch afterwards. So if you feel like you missed something, you could always go back and rewatch it on youtube.com/Cubase. So let me just see if I can find one quick project here. If not, we'll move on. Okay, so now one of the problems gets to be often with, as we're working with our different projects, we see our composers that kind of live and die, being able to spend all of their time in their MIDI key editor. And, for them, the ability of having their marker tracks and those global tracks is a really big deal. But one of the things that gets to be really interesting is, when we talk to our composer clients, that many of them, their assistants will spend so much time rendering files in different scenarios, different configurations. And that gets to be like the creative process is all done. And at that point, it's, everything is almost fully done and they have to do this very laborious, tedious task of being able to render out different files and different file configurations. So let's say we have a quick project here, kind of a typical, like a quick score. It's done by the great Carlos Chafin. But just kind of give you an idea. Now I needed to deliver this. Once my score is done, the creative part's done, we have to deliver this to multiple different formats for the video editor, for an MP3, for a client. So, this gets to be really tedious. So if we come right over here, we could just say, I want to do my export audio mix down. And this has some interesting things. And one of the fascinating new things that was introduced in Cubase Pro 11 was the concept of job queues. So with this, we will go ahead and, we could have different naming schemes. So we could say, I wanted this, to include name. I could have a free name. I could have this automatically placed into a mixdown folder within the project folder. But let's say I needed to do a single stereo mixdown. The client is in their car and they want me to email it to their phone so they can listen to it during their drive. So I can say, we're going to come right over here and this is going to be an MP3 at 320K. We could save each of these different scenarios as a preset. And at this point, I could say, let's just add this to the queue. And let's say the video editor, he needs a rough 24-bit 48K WAV file. So we're going to create this scenario. Let's add that to the queue. Someone wants to leave with a audio CD, so they need a 16-bit 44.1 mixdown. So we'll just come right over here. Let's add that to the queue. Now let's say we need to deliver all of our different stems. So I need to take all of my, violins, all my different groups, or I needed to take this so that they're all equal length audio files so that no one can mess it up. So I could come right over here. Let's say I wanted my stereo out, but I wanted my effects channels as well as all of my instrument tracks, my audio, so all of my audio, everything. And then I wanted the processing to be on this one completely dry. So let's add that. And this way my mono tracks come out as mono, my stereo tracks come out as stereo. Now I wanted to add my channel strip and my sound effects and the channel EQ. So I could say, let's add the inserts and the strip. So let's add that to the queue. At this point, someone wanted all the different stems for live use with the master effects included and the channel and our send effects. So I'll just come right over here and let's add these to our queue as well. So we now have all these different job queues created. Let's say I had a huge template and I'm only seeing, and I have a lot of empty tracks. So I created a quick project logical editor preset. So you could do stuff like, okay, I want to select and hide, so I can say select only tracks that have events. And now, because it doesn't do anyone any good to render empty files, it just people think you screwed up, you made a mistake. I was like, they left this one out. I know they left the track out. And at this point, we could just say, include only the selected tracks, and let's add that to the queue. So now instead of having to sit here and babysit the exporting process, I could save each of those different scenarios as presets and come right over here and just click on Start Queue Export, and it would make all of those files for me without me having to do it every single time, one by one, by one, by one, etc. So the job export queue can really simplify kind of that whole process for you. So it's a huge time saver for, anyone that's doing different mixes, alternate mixes. Oh, do this without the vocals, do this with the vocals, do this 3 dB up, include these. I want the stems with effects. I need this in surround. I need it in stereo. I need this in mono. All those different scenarios can be easily handled directly with the export audio job queues. Now I'll show you one last thing. This will be our one extra thing that's pretty special, because a couple years ago, Steinberg started working with Spectral Layers. And with Cubase Pro, you actually get a copy of Spectral Layers 1. And I have kind of the full version installed, but I'll show you kind of a concept. So if you haven't kind of experimented with Spectral Layers, it allows you to do spectral editing. So many times when we actually do audio editing on particular on audio, we cut all of the frequencies, but maybe we just want to kind of cut particular frequencies. So I could go here to my audio, and then we could go to extensions to Spectral Layers 1. And I have the full version installed here. So when we look at this, we could actually see kind of the frequencies that are going on. And I'll just go ahead and play this track. So if I wanted to select different components that were actually, maybe I had a rumble or someone hit the guitar, the acoustic guitar, they kicked the mic stand. You could take out those particular frequencies quite easily. But one of the things that Spectral Layers 1 allows you to do is to just come over here and you could do an Unmix Vocals. So I'll just give this a second here. And if you have the full Spectral Layers Pro, you could actually, at this point, unmix all the components. So we'll show you what this is. So imagine baking a cake and then saying, I want the eggs out and I want the eggs put back in their shell. This is kind of what this is doing. All right, so now on the full version, I could break apart the vocals, the piano, drums, bass, and other. But on the Spectral Layers 1 that comes with Cubase Pro, we could break apart the vocals from the backing track. So when I wanted to come here, let's go ahead and play. So I'm just going to solo the vocals. If I wanted to just mute the vocals from the backing track.
Well, you best pretend you're blind. I don't mean to be unkind.
And now what I could even do, even in Spectral Layers 1, I could just take the vocals and drag it right out, and it will create the vocals in its own track. So I could have my backing track. So as we're kind of playing, and even if we have like harmonies,
I don't care about you anyway. No, no, no. I don't care about what you've got to say. No, no, no. You and I say
So being able to take the vocals out of recording to be able to re-record vocals or do any other type of task is a huge, huge feature. So that's a quick overview. I know we covered a tremendous amount of information, but this will be available to view again on youtube.com/Cubase. I want to thank everyone who's watched the Hangout. If you wanted to let your friends know about this particular presentation, I want to thank everyone from Believe in Music that attended the Hangout. And, if you need to check out Cubase, you can get a trial version of Cubase to experience it yourself. But as you can see, all of this was done without any specialized add-on tools. So think about it almost like a cell phone. It's like we don't buy a separate MP3 player, a separate GPS, a separate video camera, a separate still camera, and a separate phone. We kind of have this all incorporated because the experience of using those different components together and the interoperability between those is a much better working environment. And that's what Cubase Pro 11 offers. So we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for attending the presentation, and we'll be doing a normal Club Cubase Google Hangout on Friday, the 22nd, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Tomorrow we'll do about 45 minutes on what's in Nuendo. So Nuendo will have everything that we've seen in Cubase plus more. And then on Thursday, my colleague John Barron will be showing Dorico. So you want to check that out as well. But thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time. And we hope this was a fun presentation to watch, and we'll see you guys very soon. Thank you very much.